All right, don't get me wrong. Stephan is great in many ways, but he is totally misinterpreting the data here, and I'm going to show you why. Real estate is a local thing. Every market is completely different, and there's a few points in here I think that Graham just really misses the mark on. So let's watch.
What's up, guys? It's Graham here. Now, I usually don't record informal videos without a whole bunch of charts and graphs and fancy research, but something needs to be said about the current state of the housing market and the direction it's headed, because I don't think anyone could be truly prepared for what we might see begin to happen. So with everything going on, from declining home sales, sky-high price...
All right, let's pause right there. So declining home sales, if I saw that right, it says pending home sales fell 20%. Now, you're not wrong. Okay, we are actually down too. I actually looked at our data. If I go over, I see that week for week from last year, we're down 25% on pending sales. Why wouldn't this happen? From January to March to August, so January to March of last year, interest rates barely rose from like low to high twos up into the threes, and then came back down in the middle of summer in the high twos. The exact opposite has happened, and massively so. We have gone from basically 3% up to 5.5%. Yeah, that's going to affect how many homes you get under contract. But one of the things you absolutely must do when you're looking at data is you have to take it in context. This is sort of like saying, hey, because the temperature this week is different than temperature last week, the world is ending. You know, like you have to look at climate change over a span of time. So if we look at the amount of pending home sales over a period of time, we're actually totally within normal realms. The second piece he hits on here is homes hit a record of 416,000. Well, yeah, duh. Any product or service on the face of the planet is a product of supply and demand. And when demand severely outstrips supply, the prices go up. This is like common sense. Now, I get it that what he's probably trying to do here is drive some like fear, loss, greed. He's trying to get deliver on the thumbnail that he does. And kudos to you, Graham. You have great thumbnails and titles. It's part of the reason you're as big as you are. However, to have the limited supply that we've had and the interest rates that we've had for the last 2 years and expect anything less is foolish. All right, we'll keep going.
Coming from someone who's been a real estate agent, a real estate investor, buyer, seller, and nosy looky-loo on Zillow for almost 15 years now. Gosh, has it been that long?
Quick note here, he was a real estate agent, then became an investor, and really got out of real estate for a period of time. But he kind of goes into that next.
I received my real estate license in 2008, right out of high school, and from there, I pursued a full-time career as a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker before joining the Oppenheim Group in 2015.
I can tell you that would have been a really cool experience to jump into real estate and go into the Oppenheimer Group. Pretty prestigious and pretty amazing, but 2008 would have been a rough time to potentially start your real estate career. The housing market had just done a severe correction and didn't really recover until like 2012. That would have been tough.
But for those who remember what the market was like back in 2008, when I first started, it was horrible. Home prices had just seen one of the most meteoric rises at all time, and I was jumping into a new career at the peak without any prior experience, right as home prices were about to fall and fall and fall.
Now, Graham does this exceptionally well, where he kind of like embellishes a little bit. Yes, there was a big correction between 2008 and 2012. Almost every market saw this. Our market in particular, right around 2012 is when we kind of troughed out and slowly started creeping up there. And it became a far more balanced market. And I like using that word balanced because what we've been in more recently has been a unbalanced seller's market. And so we are heading into a more balanced market. And it's always to what degree? It's not on or off. There just seems to be the sense that we're always trying to drive home the point that the sky is either falling or fear and greed is running the streets.
That housing prices don't just keep going higher. And just as some people thought the market was over forever, others were ready to seize the opportunity.
I totally agree here. I mean, if you were an investor between like 2008 and 2012, you were able to scoop up deals that you would just drool over today. And it was that whole Warren Buffett thing. When people are selling, you buy. When other people are buying, you sell. You have to have some guts to be in the real estate investing industry, and you have to be able to make calls that everybody else is saying the sky is falling and be able to move forward with confidence.
And after several years of building up my own business, I finally decided to take the leap of faith to buy property for myself. In 2011 and 2012, I purchased 3 bank-owned properties, I fixed them up, and then I rented them out.
Perfect. 2012 is what I said. It was the trough of it. And I think he picks up some foreclosures and some short sales, which means that not only is he picking up at the bottom where it actually starts coming up, almost perfectly timed, he's also getting underpriced properties and potentially not the greatest condition, and is able to build in some sweat equity into it as well. So he got some really killer deals here.
From there, I continued building up my business as a real estate agent so I could save up enough money to buy another property that I could remodel, and another, and another, and another. Really, up until March of 2020, real estate was my priority, and even now I'm still involved in almost every aspect of the business, whether that be managing my own properties or partnering with other people. But over time, I've definitely noticed a shift, very similar to when I first started working in real estate, and that I think is worth discussing.
This segue is good. I like what he's talking about here. He's noticing a shift, and this is exactly what I have been saying for probably the last 12 months in a row. Things are changing. If you're expecting to go on the market and get ridiculous offers, it's just not happening in the same capacity it was for the last 12 to 18 months. So he noticed the shift. He has these investments. My guess is he's probably going to say, I go ahead, I'm going to liquidate these because I'm going to put the money into another area, right? If you have a performing asset, the only reason you would really sell or get out of it is because either one, you're no longer interested in it, or you want to reallocate those funds to a better performing asset.
We should talk about what most people want to know, and that would be when the housing market is going to come crashing down. And as a buyer who's actively scouring the market myself, the honest answer is it depends where you're looking. Any quick Google search is going to tell you that home sales are plunging substantially, Bay Area homes see the largest May through June price drop on record, and top 10 cities where home prices are being slashed. And yeah, on the surface, it seems like a pretty good time to be a buyer right now, but that's not the entire picture.
So this is what I'm trying to drive home the point. Stop paying attention to the headlines, listen and look to the data. These headlines, all they're trying to do, just like any other type of clickbait, is to drive fear and greed and get you to read it and pay attention. These headlines from CNN, NBC, Fox News, any of these who are saying the market is crashing, days on market is up 300%. They don't care about whether you sell your house or for more money or whether you're getting a good deal on the purchase. All they want you to do is pay attention to their headlines.
Overall, it's still incredibly competitive, and in June, the National Association of Realtors pointed out that homes stayed on the market for an average of 14 days, which is 2 days less than they were back in May, and 3 days less than we saw a year ago. However, with real estate, it's difficult to place a one-size-fits-all approach across everything.
Totally agree. I was just talking on a podcast earlier today, this whole idea of days on market. If days on market goes from 5 days to 15 days, you could say, hey, the sky is falling. That's a 300% increase. But again, if we go back and we look at context of history, the average days on market in a balanced market between 2012 to 2019-ish was anywhere between 30 and 60 days. The best indicator to know whether something is either balanced or unbalanced is that months of inventory. 6 is neutral, above 6 and the higher you go is a buyer's market, below 6 and the closer you get to 0 is a seller's market. And we are still very much in a seller's market.
And some markets have even begun to see a net decline. In fact, Boise, Idaho saw more than 60% of their sellers issue a price reduction, or a price improvement, as the realtors like to say, along with 50% of sellers dropping their asking price throughout Denver, Colorado, and Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, so let's just take that same piece of data that he's talking about there and apply it to our market. Are we doing any price reductions? Well, let's take a look at the data. First, we can look at the number of price changes, and you can see that steadily going up from January to now. And second, you can look at the percentage of that price reduction. And you can see that that's steadily increasing again from January timeframe of 1% all the way down to about 2.8% on the price reduction. So not only are more happening, yes, and they're happening at greater quantities, yes, but they are not massive. One thing I will definitely give him credit on saying here is that it's market dependent. He's looking at 2 totally different markets here. He's pointing at stats. So what I would say is if they've had this massive 20, 30, 40, or 50% increase on market values in the last year or two, those are going to be the markets that are the most susceptible to massive corrections.
Basically, the states that saw the highest influx of home buyer demand in 2021 are now the first ones to see the market beginning to soften.
Should have waited a second there.
In terms of my own experience though, I have to say, it's still wildly competitive out there depending on where you're looking. As a home buyer today, fortunately, you'll be in a position where you could finally begin to negotiate on deals, you could offer a lower price, and if you miss out on something, no worries, because most likely there's going to be another property listed shortly.
Okay, so he's right here. We, on our team in our area right now, I am seeing buyers, if I'm like, hey, be patient. We're getting some deals where they're getting closing cost assistance where that was completely unreasonable 12 to 18 months ago. I had conversations even as early as this spring, January timeframe, where someone came in, they're like, hey, Dan, I need closing cost assistance. I'm like, hey, you're probably going to have to write 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 offers, depending on what you're looking for, before you're going to get something accepted, because it's just so competitive right now. And as soon as those interest rates went skyrocketing up to 5.5%, things started to change.
It's also clear that rental prices are continuing to move even higher. So if you're an investor who prioritizes long-term cash flow, it's going to be competitive.
Hey, this is a great point. What I have said consistently over time, even with interest rates going from 3 to 5.5%, is to a degree, it almost doesn't matter. Every buyer in the marketplace is making a value proposition on, is it worth more to rent or is it worth more to buy? It doesn't really matter what the interest rate is. It's always that value proposition. If I'm a renter, I'm going to go out there and see how far does $2,500 get me? I can rent this, or for $2,500 or something equivalent, I can buy this. And if those things are severely imbalanced one way or the other, it's going to push me towards either renting or buying.
But now let's talk about this through the perspective of a seller. As some of you know, I've recently made the decision to sell off a few of my very first rental properties that I purchased. And up until a few months ago, I had the mindset that you don't wait to buy real estate. You buy real estate and you wait.
Totally agree here. It is all about supply and demand. The only thing I would push back on Graham here is this is an N of 1 experiment. If you're relying upon anecdotal evidence to give advice to a whole bunch of people, you can get yourself into trouble. So what he saw was that his market was still very hot and that he could put something on the market and probably get multiple offers.
But as I've gotten busier with new opportunities on non-mortgaged properties located in the state that I no longer live, it just makes sense to give them off to a new owner who can manage them in ways that I just don't have an interest in.
This is exactly what I said earlier. He's no longer interested.
Now, I'm still holding on to about 80% of my real estate portfolio, and these just happen to be the few least expensive ones, but I have to say, I was absolutely blown away by the amount of activity I got. There were multiple offers over asking within days of listing the property at a price that I couldn't have dreamed of just 2 years ago.
Well, duh, Graham. The most appreciation has happened in the last 2 years.
Even as of recently, nearly 5 offers are being received for every property sold, with more than 50% of buyers still offering over list price.
Yeah, this is a good point. So offering over list price. Out of all the properties that were listed, what was the contract ratio to list price ratio? Most recently, I think for us, that was 100.8%. One of the big points here I think that is super important to understand is even if you drop below that 100% ratio, it doesn't matter. Looking at that indicator alone to tell you whether it's a buyer's market or seller's market or whether the housing market is going to crash would be ill-advised. If I look at the average list price to contract price received between that neutral market or that appreciating market from 2012 to 2019, it was something like 96 to 98%. And during that period of time, the housing market was still appreciating 3 to 5%. So it doesn't matter if it dipped below that 100%. It matters really if the actual market value of the properties are consistently going down over time.
Of course, just like the last example, it does matter a lot in terms of where you live, and some markets are seeing a decline anywhere from 3 to 18%. But despite what some people might think, the market is still extremely strong even with higher interest rates on properties that are priced competitively. However, the one we really need to talk about is the rental market, because this is where we're seeing the biggest changes.
So it looks like there's a lot more here to cover than I originally anticipated. Part 2 coming tomorrow.